afternoon. My name is Nina Weber-Worth, and I am a proud member of both Miami Design Preservation League and the Wolfsonian for the last 25 years. I also serve, I joined when I was 12. I also serve on the board of MDPL in the membership department, so I am making a shameless plug here. For Art Deco Weekend, we are giving discounted memberships at $25. That's half price. And if you act now, you'll also get a free poster or a free tour. So all you have to do is text Art Deco to the words Art Deco to 44321. That's 44321. Act now. Well, personally, Art Deco Weekend has played an important part in my life. In 1987, my husband, Don, came here collecting Art Deco posters, and as a city planner from Boston, he just took one look around and said, oh, this place is going to turn. So he bought our place, our unit at 14th and Ocean, where I proudly sit on my perch, which is because Art Deco buildings don't have balconies. We built window seats, and we watch the world. In 2007, we chaired Art Deco Weekend. It was from Miami to Shanghai. Shanghai has the largest collection of Art Deco buildings in the whole Pacific Rim. And we brought over 23 city planners to show them how preserving Art Deco became an economic engine for Miami Beach. And we went back in 2010 to find that so much of the buildings had been preserved and also had wonderful plaques describing the architect and everything. So it really was a benchmark for us. And I encourage you, as I said, to join both organizations because they're so wonderful. Lastly, but most importantly, 25 years ago, I had the good fortune to volunteer as a docent under the tutelage of Lea Nickless. She is my Shiro, and now I introduce another Shiro, Shoshana, to introduce her.
My name is Shoshana Resnikoff. I'm a curator here at the Wolfsonian, and it is my great pleasure and honor to introduce Lea Nickless, a colleague and a friend. Lea is research curator here at the Wolf, where she works with museum founder Mickey Wolfson on collection acquisitions, management, and exhibitions. She has worked with this collection since before the museum's inception, and is also the co-curator of one of our most recent exhibitions, Universe of Things, Mickey Wolfson Collects, which if you haven't visited, please do after Lea's talk. It's on the 6th floor, and I'm the co-curator as well, so I'm biased, but I highly recommend it. Lea has also served as editor, writer, researcher, and project manager for the 2019 publication of Founder's Choice, which you can also buy in the gift shop. Separate from her stellar work here at the Wolfsonian, Lea is an accomplished multimedia artist in her own right and has participated in solo and group shows throughout South Florida and the country. And so with that, I would like to present Lea Nickless.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Welcome all. Thank you also for coming out this afternoon to take this unscientific survey of young women aviatrixes at the beginning of the aviation period. The image you see on the screen here is actually a design drawing for the trophy, which is up in the exhibition that Shoshana just mentioned. It was designed by Victor Schreckengost, and it was won 2 years in a row by one of these amazing female aviators, Edna Gardner Whyte. But we'll talk more about her later. But I wanted to set the scene to just sort of talk about how in 1903 this amazing thing happened on a cold beach in December in North Carolina when the Wright brothers actually were able to finally gain flight in a heavier than air powered vehicle. The world was basically transfixed from that moment, and immediately I think everyone caught some sort of air fever. So let's hope this, say a prayer with me, that this will load, because this is a video of the Wright brothers in 1908. Should load in a couple seconds. The Wright brothers in 1908 went to Paris and did an air show. And of course, enormous amounts of people had the chance to see the show at that time. Anyway, many people, hundreds, probably thousands of people, saw this amazing new flight, and one of those was this woman, Baroness De La Roche. She was born in Paris in 1892, and she actually wasn't a baroness, but somehow got that title by a publication, flight publication. From there on, she kind of liked the title, so she became Baroness De La Roche. And she is thought to be the first woman to actually pilot an airplane, and indeed she is the first woman to be the licensed pilot. She received her license in 1910. So very short time after that. The term aviatrix is said to have first been used in 1907, and this is a part of an article in a U.S. newspaper, which I just thought was so funny. Do you get it? Aviatrix, the woman air pilot has arrived. Unfortunately, she died tragically in an air accident in 1919, which is a recurring motif here. These women were incredibly brave and daring, but also in some cases foolhardy when you see some of the kinds of vehicles that they were transporting themselves around in. So the Panama Pacific International Exposition in San Francisco in 1915 was also a really big event to promote this new technology. There were these hugely popular aeronautical programs that again introduced air flight to hundreds, probably thousands of people. This is a postcard that is in the library collection here at the Wolfsonian of a sculpture that was on view at the Panama Pacific Exposition. It is this sort of interesting, almost a Madonna of the air figure, and she's glancing up, and instead of holding the Christ child, she's holding propeller and what seems to be some clouds below.
What's around her temples?
I think this is, well, she has, I thought it might be some sort of listening device. I don't really know. It looks like a flight helmet of sorts, but it's not really clear to me. So this was actually on view in the Manufacturer's Palace in the Italian section. This is an Italian sculpture from Volterra, but I haven't been able to find really anything about it. And let's just to put it in context, what else was going on in the country at this time. Women were fighting to gain the right to vote. This is 1917, a demonstration in March of suffragettes coming down Fifth Avenue in New York City. And then, sadly, one of the things that really pushed women's rights forward, or their opportunities forward, were the wars. And World War I in particular broke down barriers between civilian and military life for many women. With men away at war, women stepped into their roles, and they were in support of war efforts, whether in factories or on the farms, and it made a huge difference. This photograph is of Army recruits in the UK in 1917. So you start seeing imagery of women actually participating in war efforts. This is a lithograph part of a portfolio of images done by C.R.W. Nevinson. He was appointed an official war artist in 1917, and these prints were intended to, the title is The Great War, Britain's Efforts and Ideals, and they were 66 prints that were intended to really show Britain's war objectives, military activities, and efforts on the home front. And you see this team working on building an airplane, and below is a woman assisting in that process. Now, women in World War I were, for the most part, assisting in factories, building airplanes, helping, building munitions. But as far as I was able to find out, the only woman who is purported, nobody seems to really say for sure, but Marie Marvingt, who was a French woman, there's evidence that she piloted a bomber on at least two occasions in 1915. She was a very competitive sportswoman who was called out in 1914 in an anti-feminist publication as being a poor example for young women, because she did not participate in sports for entertainment or health, but displayed unladylike characteristics in that she competes fervently and really tries to win. Yeah. Now things really moved forward. By the time the Second World War came about, of course, women were really on the forefront. The Women's Air Force service pilots, WASP, there were more than 1,000, there were about 1,100 of these women who flew all the way. They were mostly ferrying jets, they were not on combat, but they were extremely integrally involved in the war effort. This is a publication from the library here, and again, it really, it describes all the occupations that women pursued in the war effort, including pilots, and the WACS, which was the Women's Army Corps, and the WAVES, which was the Women Accepted for Voluntary Emergency Service, which was part of the Navy. And just as an aside, since we're talking about sheroes, Dickie Meyer was a female war correspondent. She's also known as Dickie Chappelle, and she was the first female war correspondent who actually died on assignment. She died in Vietnam in 1965. Here we have another print of a British woman artist. This is a World War II. She actually founded the Air Transport Auxiliary in World War II and was the head of that. This is a print from the Wolfsonian's collection, again, part of a larger group of prints that are telling the story of the war, and they are actually also created by a woman artist, Ethel Leontine Gabain, and they were commissioned by the British government. And then, just to go further afield, we mustn't forget the night witches, they were known as. These were a team of Soviet women fighters who had no radar, no machine guns, no radios, no parachutes. All they had on board was a map, a compass, ruler, stopwatches, flashlights, and pencils. Yet they successfully completed 30,000 bombing raids and dropped more than 23,000 tons of munitions on advancing German armies. And the Germans were terrified of them and called them the night witches. So that's sort of your overview of how these different global events really shifted how women were seen and being treated. And now I just want to talk about a few of these early women aviators, these pioneers. Harriet Quimby was born in 1875 in Michigan. She had moved to San Francisco. She became a journalist. She wrote for Leslie's Illustrated Weekly, which was an American publication, arts and literature publication. In 1911, she was the first woman to be granted a license here in the United States. So I just love this the way they put this. American aviator granted license, and at the bottom, made graceful flights and met all requirements of the Aero Club. So our first American woman pilot is this lovely Harriet. It was very early on. She actually designed her own jumpsuit. And as an aside, also, I want to say that I'm very jealous of Shoshana and her jumpsuit. I should have thought ahead and found myself a jumpsuit when I was very young, because these ladies are all about the jumpsuits. So she actually designed her own jumpsuit, which was wool-backed satin, and she wrote about it in the Leslie's Illustrated Weekly. And one of the quotes, she says, "I do feel well qualified to tell a beginner how she must dress, and that she must do if she expects to be a flyer. If a woman wants to fly, first of all, she must, of course, abandon skirts and don a knickerbocker uniform." So this was the uniform that she created for herself. And she speaks somehow of it being transformed into a skirt too, but I can't quite figure out how that was going to happen. But she said there was some way that it would be made into a skirt. And most importantly, it was purple. That was her signature look. Now, and this is from a postage stamp in 1993. Now, she, in 1912, was the first pilot to fly across the English Channel, but tragically, it coincided with the sinking of the Titanic. So she didn't get any press. It didn't even appear in the newspapers because everything else was being overcome by that terrible news. And then, unfortunately for her as well, then the following year, she actually perished in an airplane crash in Boston when her plane just dive-bombed into the field. So we say goodbye to poor Harriet as well. I'm not going to talk a lot about Amelia Earhart because there's been so much done about her. But she truly was probably, she certainly was the most famous woman aviator, and probably at this time she was the most famous woman in the world. And she really had the look down. She just had it, and she made a huge impact on fashions, here in the States and internationally, with a new look. She is said to have cut her hair very slow, like every night she would just cut an inch off of her hair so her mother wouldn't notice, until finally she had the bob. It just wasn't proper to have that short hair when she first started, but that became her signature look. When she first bought a leather jacket, she didn't want it to look new, so she slept in it 3 nights in a row. She wanted to have that worn, broken-in leather coat look. So she then also, part of the need to make money for her endeavors, she was also, quite a businesswoman, and way before the celebrities of our time, she launched her own line of clothing in 1933. They sold at Marshall Field and at Macy's. And she used some unconventional materials such as parachute silk and some canvases that were akin to used in aviation. And some of the details, buttons, like airplane propellers and that sort of thing. She also launched a line of luggage, and this was also introduced in 1933, and it was marketed as real airplane luggage for the first time, sturdy and lightweight. And what's really kind of strange to me is it was sold for decades after she disappeared. It was sold well into the 90s. I'm sure not looking quite like that, but her brand remained strong even after she was gone. And the Wolfsonian actually has a Amelia Earhart luggage, but unfortunately the photograph we had was, I didn't show it to you, but it looks very much like the one she's got. So other female flyers also had to come up with ways of dealing with having the flexibility of knickerbockers or trousers and also being a lady. And this is a woman, Edith Foltz, who was a prominent pilot, And she created this get-up, which is called the folds up. And in 1931, it was made of a blouse, knickers, and a skirt. The skirt was designed to be pulled over the shoulders to make a blouse while flying. Upon landing, the overblouse could be put back down into a skirt. And this is Faye Gillis, another pilot who designed a chic. She wanted to come up with a chic aviatrix costume, and she made this out of pastel-colored gabardine, and she had a matching helmet. Because she was saying, this is on the right what I would have to normally wear, which is kind of a shapeless jumpsuit, and she wanted something more fashion forward. Okay, so then we come to our next pilot, Phoebe Fairgrave Onley. She was born in 1901 in Des Moines, Iowa. She has a lot of firsts as well. She was the first woman to receive an airplane mechanics license. She was the first female transport pilot. She met her to-be husband when she went to a airfield trying to find someone who would teach her to fly. That was one thing that a lot of these women, a challenge for many of these women is that nobody wanted to teach them how to fly. Men would not teach them how to fly. So Vernon Omalee taught her how to fly, and then later they married. She, before she was out of her teens, had started a flying circus. She did stunts, wing walking, hanging below by her teeth. She danced the Charleston on the wing. She did stunts for the Perils of Pauline. Here she is. And she put suction cups on the bottom of her sneakers to help her with these wing walking tricks. But I think by the late 20s, she had kind of given up on the stunts. They are extremely dangerous. And she went more toward really her piloting skills. And probably the height of her career in terms of flying was in 1931, this race from California to Cleveland, which was not a women's only race. Women were allowed to enter for the first time. And she competed against 63 other pilots, 46 of whom were men, and she took the title. Yes. So Eleanor Roosevelt called her after that and asked her if she would be willing to campaign for her husband, who was running for the president the next year. So Miss Omalee flew this little plane all over the country campaigning for Roosevelt. And after his successful campaign, she was appointed by President Roosevelt as Special Advisor for Air Intelligence to the National Advisory Committee for Aeronautics. This made her the first woman to be appointed to a federal aviation position. Then I wanted to talk a bit about Bessie Coleman. She is our first African-American pilot. She was born in 1892 in Atlanta, Texas, of Cherokee and African-American ancestry. In 1916, she moved to Chicago and was living there when pilots coming back, she made friends with pilots coming back from World War I and became extremely interested in learning to fly, tried to find someone who would teach her to fly. No one would teach her to fly, so she went to Paris. And that's where she got her flying license in Paris. She came back to the States and was quite successful running these shows, making these air shows. People were still so interested in seeing airplanes flight. It was still so fresh and new and so exciting to the general public. And in this, the race is only aviatrix. And in 1995, a postage stamp was made in her honor, but again, tragically, I'm sorry. She also died very soon in 1926 in Jacksonville, Florida. Again, it was at such an early time with the technology, and unfortunately, a lot of these women did perish quite early. Mabel Cody is another really interesting character that most people probably have never heard of, but I became completely obsessed with. This photograph is actually in Coral Gables, in the Coral Gables flying field around 1921. George Merrick hired Mabel Cody and her flying circus to do these presentations because he was trying to sell real estate. So he'd bring people out to Coral Gables for these great events. The events were free. Mabel Cody would fly around and do crazy things, and people would presumably buy real estate. So she advertised a lot in Miami Herald. You can see this is 1921, the world's greatest aviator. I don't really think that's true, but Mabel Cody's flying circus. So she would perform out in Hialeah. She would perform all over the place. Pancho Barnes was actually born into a very wealthy family in Pasadena in 1901. Her grandfather was Thaddeus S.C. Lowe, who was a pioneer of modern aviation. He established the first military air unit in the Civil War with his balloon, the Intrepid, which he would go up in and then report back with, troop movements and so forth. And then he came back from the war and made a lot of money. Pancho, and he, by the way, also took her to her first air show when she was 10 years old, and she was completely smitten. She grew up as a tomboy. She liked to ride horses. She had no interest in anything her mother had interest in, which was wanting her to be a debutante. She evidently cursed like a sailor. She did exactly what she wanted to do. Her mother decided to try and take control of the situation and married her off at 18 to an Episcopalian minister. That didn't really go over very well. She decided to go down to Mexico on a banana boat and dressed as a man, and found out that the banana boat was actually transporting arms to the revolutionaries in Mexico. So she got into a bit of hot water. At that point, she did dress as a man, and somehow the name Pancho came about at that moment, and it stuck with her. She liked it, and she was Pancho Barnes from then on. She came back from Mexico, and she took flying lessons, and then became a stunt pilot in Hollywood. She's known for establishing the first union for stunt pilots because she was mad at Howard Hughes because he was underpaying his pilots. In 1930, she actually broke Amelia Earhart's airspeed record. Remember, she had money to buy the fastest airplanes. At this moment, she did, at least. Her mother had died quite early and also left her money, and she lived very lavishly and was very generous to those around her. But after the stock market crash and then mismanagement of funds, she really wasn't in good shape. She lost everything and ended up taking whatever she had left to buy this piece of property out of the middle of the Mojave Desert. She intended to make a flying dew ranch. So it was, I think, about 150 acres, Pancho's guest ranch, and later also the Happy Bottom Riding Club. So this place was completely desolate when she moved out there, and I think she must have had incredible foresight or luck or both, because suddenly this becomes a place for super secret testing of aircraft. And the pilots are out there and they have nowhere to go. When they're first out there, they're living in tents. So she very quickly figures out how to entertain the pilots, and she hires pretty girls to come out to act as not escorts, but see, there's a lot of speculation about what was going on at the Happy Bottom Riding Club. But she was very, very much involved. She loved the pilots. She loved knowing what was going on. And when the speed of sound was broken, everyone knew that the pilot was going to get a free steak at ponchos. I mean, she knew exactly what was going on out there, and was very integral to what eventually became Edwards Air Force Base. Anyway, okay, so now let's come to Miami. Starting in 1929, these air maneuvers started taking place. Florida had long been a destination for aviators. First of all, it's basically flat as a pancake, and then it has all of these beaches that can be used as runways. And remember, in the beginning, there were very few actual runways, and people were landing in fields or on roads or on beaches. As early as 1915, a publication, Aerial Age Weekly, reported that Vincent Astor and Harry Payne Whitney, among others, were forming an aviation colony in Miami. They would come and winter here in their hydroplanes. I'm not sure how long that lasted, but definitely, and the weather, of course, was another big draw, because these air maneuvers happened in January. So, of course, the country wanted to come to Miami in January. We know that. So this is a postcard. Army pursued planes over Miami, Florida. And the caption on the back reads, "Florida calls to all nature-loving people. Not only is it a playground for the leisure class and a winter home for the wealthy, but it is a year-round place in which to play, rest, and work. The annual All-American Air Meet focuses all eyes on Miami for this spectacular occasion." So these were huge booster events that would bring people from all over the country. It attracted the top aviators from the country, and as well as all kinds of other tourism. Thousands of people would gather in what is now Hialeah, where the airfield was. And they were known as the Olympics of Aviation. And these are the ads in the Miami Herald for the 11th annual Miami All-American Air Maneuvers, which was the event where Edna Gardner raced and won the Culver Trophy. And that is the trophy that is upstairs for you to see. And just to give you an idea, I mean, this was a universal, newsreels were created. You would have gone to the movies and seen clips of these air races. And this is our Edna. She was tough as nails, and she was incredibly competitive. She was all the things that first pilot had. She wanted to win desperately. She wasn't playing for fun. She was born in 1902 in Minnesota, and she had a super hard childhood. Her father died when she was 10. Her mother almost immediately got TB, couldn't take care of her, farmed her out to different family members, and she moved around a lot. She became a nurse, and when she was working as a nurse, she was introduced to flying by sort of a chance acquaintance, as it turns out, and she fell in love with it. She knew that's what she had to do. She was hooked. And the thing about it was she, and this is the other quote that I love too, she was, she was the flying nurse. She would make $75 an hour as a nurse. I mean, not an hour, I'm sorry, a month. $75 a month as a nurse, and she would have to pay $35 an hour for flight instruction. So every penny that she made went towards, and then some probably. I mean, she was probably borrowing from the people because she was so motivated. She wanted to do this with a passion beyond. And she was fearless too. She was actually, in 1932, she'd really been selected for this mission that a doctor had put together to fly nonstop from New York to Rome in this plane, the American Nurse, to do, his idea was to study the effects of long-distance flight, and she was to parachute over Florence in honor of Florence Nightingale's 100th birthday. So it was this whole big thing, and she thought, well, this is now my chance to make it, to get publicity like Amelia Earhart. And she was so gung-ho for it, even though her flight instructor at the time, or it was actually her boyfriend too, was like, this sounds really dangerous, I don't really think it's a good idea. And she was getting mad. Oh, men are always stopping me doing what I want to do. And the Navy declined her leave. And she was really upset about that. They said it wasn't appropriate for a military person to go on this kind of a flight. But she was really considering resigning from the Navy. And then in the meantime, they selected another nurse who had a flying license. They said, sorry, you can't go on this. So it turned out it was another Edna who went on this flight. Her name was Edna Newcomer. Off they went, and you can see they have this mascot. I don't know if you can tell, there's like a little hedgehog, not hedgehog, a groundhog, who's the mascot named Tailwind, which is up there in the window. And off they went to Rome, but something happened, and they were never found again. So the American nurse plane went down somewhere, probably in the Atlantic, but was never found. So Edna sort of put a point. She said, for example, if Amelia had still been alive, she would have been fourth in this list in terms of air hours logged. So she probably needed a little more experience, was Edna's take on it. But she really blamed Putnam for pushing her in this way. And this is the Fort Lauderdale Daily News in 1941. Here she's listed as having 5,600 hours, and again, more than any other woman in the country. But you see how this idea of aviation, a career in aviation, is starting to take hold. Women are now accepted as pilots and moving forward. So that takes us to our beautiful trophy, the K.K. Culver Trophy. And this is a clip from the Miami Herald article. This is Miss Miami Aviation of 1940, who's posing with the K.K. Culver Trophy. This is the artist, the designer, Victor Schreckengost. He was born in 1906, and he was an incredibly prolific industrial designer, artist, and teacher. He designed everything from bicycles to pedal cars to furniture to ceramic dinnerware. Eleanor Roosevelt commissioned him to do some dinnerware for the White House. He was really an important fellow. And this is the K.K. Culver Trophy. It was commissioned by Mr. Culver, Knight K. Culver, who was a manufacturer of airplanes. At this moment, it was the Dart, and then he then had Culver airplanes that he produced. The idea of the trophy was that it was to be, if a contestant won it 3 years in a row consecutively, it became their property. However, there was a little, a smaller replica of whatever plane they were flying that would have been held in the hands of the female figure at the top, and that would be the property, that would be the take-home for the winner. Unfortunately, we do not have the small piece. We have only the main part of the sculpture. Now, Edna Gardner Whyte won this trophy 2 years in a row, and I actually don't know who won it the following year. I tried to find out, and I couldn't identify the third year winner. But here you see how so much of this trophy, the race, was all about promotion for K.K. Culver and Dart Manufacturing Company. You see the plane in her hands was intended to be a Dart, and this was a brand new plane that's just being released and promoted. So come to Miami and see the Dart. And my final slide here is there is Edna surrounded by some of her trophies, including our Culver Trophy. This was probably around 1940. By the end of her life, she had more than 120 trophies to her name. So she had a long and very prolific life. She really loved what she did and succeeded in achieving what she wanted. So that's everything. Does anyone have any questions? Yes. It was her. It was basically her obituary. It was just saying that she died. It was who else died in the plane with her. Yeah. It was she and her companion died in that flight. Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay. So how does one explain the very high profile that Amelia Earhart managed to achieve amidst all these women? Was it because her husband was such a prominent figure in publishing, or was it the line of clothing and the luggage? I mean, what?
Well, she was the first woman to go across the Atlantic. Even though she wasn't the pilot, she went across the Atlantic with two other men in a very well-publicized crossing in 1929, I believe. It got so much publicity, even though she said for herself, all I did was sit in the back and log. I shouldn't do a thing. Putnam was responsible for Lindbergh getting all of his publicity. He published a book. So he was very tuned into all this. So he was mentoring and promoting Amelia before they married. So I really think, Putnam was the one. So she then, of course, successfully flew across on her own, and then she had some other really big, successful crossings. So she was constantly in the public eye, and she just had a great stage presence. She knew how to present herself, and she lived up to that image. Yes.
Were any of these women involved in the Postal Service, U.S. Postal Service?
None of these were, no. But I know quite a few did go that route, but no, none that I know of, no. Yes.
How did you get the Culver Trophy?
I don't even know. The Culver Trophy was purchased really early on, in 1983, I think, and I don't even know where we got it from. However, the design drawings were gifted to us by Victor Schreckengost himself. When he found out that we had the trophy, he donated to us that design drawing, which is so amazing. Yes.
How old was he when he donated?
He was up there. I mean, he was way in his 90s when he passed away. It was in 2004 when he donated. Yes, Frank?
Just a comment, there's an old black and white silent movie from 1926 called The Flying Ace. It was done from the Jacksonville studios here in Florida, and it's about a black aviatrix, so maybe that connects
I'm sure.
with the woman that you mentioned.
I bet it would be.
I think you can see parts of it, I don't know the whole thing, but parts of it may be available on YouTube.
Okay.
There was also a famous Fred Astaire movie, Flying Down to Rio, where the women are standing up on the airplanes.
Right. So this was it really was.
It was Flying Down to Rio.
There was so much excitement and drama. It was just like the thing, air fever. Everyone had it. It was just the glamorous thing of that moment. And there was so much possibility. There was this idea that everyone, first we had cars. Now maybe we'll all have airplanes, so we just fly everywhere. You don't drive anywhere anymore. You just fly everywhere. Yes.
A number of these women you mentioned came from affluent backgrounds, like Pancho Barnes.
Right.
Not all, but some. And I'm curious about Bessie Coleman. Was she the daughter of a middle-class family?
No, very, very, poverty, in poverty. Sharecropper daughter lived in, very, very poor. And came to Chicago, lived with her brother, and I don't even know how she managed to get the money together to go to Paris, honestly. I don't know. I don't know how she did it.
Yeah, interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Has a biography been written about her?
Yes, and there've been some, and you can also, there's some documentaries that have been done about her as well, yeah. Any other questions? Yes?
It seems like landing on a beach would be a little tricky.
I guess you really want, I guess you want hard packed sand and make sure it's super hard packed. Yeah, I would think so too.
When the African-American lady was the first African-American pilot, were there male African-American pilots at that time?
Yes, but I wasn't really looking at them so much, but yes, she was, again, and I don't know if they also had to go to France to be trained, I'm not sure, probably.
They did a movie that says Gigi Airton.
Oh, right, but, right, that was during the war, right? But, any other questions? Oh, one more, yes?
Sorry.
No.
I'm curious about the French women, Baroness De La Roche
Yes.
and Marie Cameron. Did they live long lives, do we know, or did they also?
No, Baroness De La Roche did not, and by the way, she did not come from wealth at all.
Right.
And the second one,
Marie.
Marie, yes. She lived a long life. She lived, I think she was 86 or something when she died, so she lived a long life.
De La Roche did perish.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.